Once upon a time, in a land called South Africa, there lived a man named Nelson Mandela. He was born into a world where people were divided by the color of their skin. The government had strict laws that treated black people unfairly. They couldn't vote, go to good schools, or even walk on certain streets. Nelson grew up seeing this injustice all around him. As he became older, he decided to fight against it. He joined groups that worked peacefully to end apartheid, but when peaceful protests didn't work, some turned to more drastic actions. Nelson believed in justice, but his efforts to challenge the government got him into trouble. One day, Nelson was arrested and sent to prison for fighting against apartheid. He spent 27 long years locked away on a cold island called Robben Island. His cell was tiny, with no bed or proper toilet. Every day, he broke rocks in a quarry under the hot sun, which hurt his eyes and damaged his health. Many would have given up hope after so many years behind bars, but not Nelson. Instead of letting bitterness consume him, Nelson used his time in prison to think deeply about forgiveness and peace. He realized that holding on to anger wouldn't help anyone. It would only keep the cycle of hatred alive. So, he chose to forgive those who had imprisoned him, believing that true freedom comes from letting go of resentment. During his time in jail, Nelson also studied hard, reading books and learning about leadership. Other prisoners looked up to him because of his wisdom and calmness. Even the guards began to respect him, seeing how dignified and kind he remained despite everything. Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, the world started paying attention to Nelson's story. People across South Africa, and soon, the entire globe demanded his release. Finally, in 1990, after 27 years, Nelson walked out of prison as a free man. He was greeted by cheering crowds who saw him not just as a hero, but as a symbol of hope. But Nelson knew his work wasn't done yet. Apartheid still existed, and the country was deeply divided. Instead of seeking revenge, Nelson urged everyone to come together. "If we don't forgive," he said, "we'll never heal." 4 years later, something incredible happened. Nelson Mandela, the man who had spent nearly 3 decades in prison, was elected as the first black president of South Africa. On the day of his inauguration, he stood tall and proud, wearing a bright smile. In his speech, he promised to build a nation where everyone, no matter their race, could live side by side in harmony. As president, Nelson worked tirelessly to unite the country. He created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a group that allowed victims and oppressors to share their stories and find closure. It wasn't easy. Many people were angry and wanted punishment for past wrongs. But Nelson believed that forgiveness was the only way forward. Years later, when asked how he stayed strong through all the hardships, Nelson simply said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." He showed the world that second chances aren't just for individuals. They're for nations too. Today, Nelson Mandela is remembered as one of the greatest leaders in history. His journey teaches us that no matter how dark things seem, there is always hope. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, it means choosing to move forward. Resilience isn't about never falling, it's about getting back up every time you do.